we are so pleased this afternoon, to have Reverend Dr. Peter Meier from the Florida, Georgia district of the LCMS. He's a former parish pastor and now executive for mission and outreach for the district, and I'm sure has served many other roles in between those two. So we welcome him to join us this morning, and without taking any more time, I am going to turn it over to him now.
Thank you so much, Carol, and it's really great to be with everybody. Glad you signed on for our session today. In my role as missions and outreach, I'm always looking for different ways to connect with people and share the gospel in ways that are appropriate for any given context. And I think one of the most fun and one of the most exciting ways to share the gospel actually is with our family and with our grandchildren. And so I'm just going to share the screen here, and we'll get that up and running, and you should be able to see the grandparents and missions slide right now. So we want to talk about that. And I chose this slide, by the way, on purpose because you maybe get the reason why I chose it. Look at the ripples going out there. And it's kind of like the way things are in our lives and in our relationships. How things ripple out and how the gospel ripples out into our lives. I'd like to open us with a scripture section, and it's one that you're probably familiar with, from Psalm 78. And here the psalmist, pardon all the words on the screen, but the psalmist says, "My people, listen to my instruction, listen to the words from my mouth. I will declare wise sayings. I will speak mysteries from the past." I think grandparents are in a great spot to do this. Maybe, we have a little more white hair, and maybe that means we have a little more wisdom to share from over the years and from our lives. And God places us in families, as we see here in the Psalm, so that we have opportunities to share that wisdom. Mysteries, the psalmist says, I just say it's the mystery of God's grace in Jesus. Things we have heard and known that our fathers have passed on to us, that have rippled down to us in our families. We will not hide them from their children, but will tell a future generation the praiseworthy acts of the Lord. And those are our marching orders as believers, as Christians. Those are our marching orders as parents and as grandchildren. Or as grandparents, to tell our grandchildren, the future generation, even those not yet born, the wondrous works that God has performed. And God, He charged His people in the Old Testament with doing that, and those are still our marching orders and our roles today as parents and grandparents. And if I had to look back on my life as a parent, I think I would say probably I could have done a better job. There's a lot of times I look back and say, boy, I wish I would have been more intentional with my own kids, but I was busy. I was focused on ministry of different ways and doing whatever I had to do. And I wish I would have been more intentional. Something, however, that we did do must have stuck. And I'm thankful that our children and grandchildren are all good with the Lord and are active in church and are raising their kids to know Jesus. So, but now as a grandparent, I have a great opportunity to continue that because I want those future generations to know. So the psalmist says they were to rise and tell their children so they might put their confidence in God and not forget God's works, but keep His commands. So we have a great opportunity to do that as grandparents. I think the past year with COVID and the unique circumstances we found ourselves in has given us an opportunity to do that as well. I believe it's my belief that our first mission really is toward our children and grandchildren, our families. And so that's what we want to focus on today. I also believe that, and see what your experience is, if it matches, but I think grandparents today can have opportunities to be much more involved in the lives of their children. My grandparents, I grew up in Milwaukee. My grandparents were part of our lives all the time, but I can't say that they were involved in our lives as their grandchildren in the same way that we're involved in our children and grandchildren's lives today. I think it seems to be, to me anyway, much more active in our life with our grandchildren. And so I have a slide here. I just want to show you some of these active times that we are. At the top left of the screen, you'll see my wife Kathy and I with our 7 very active grandchildren. We got them all to sit. They weren't all looking at the camera, but we did get them all to sit sort of quietly for a moment when that was taken. And that's there's 6 of them on there. The 7th one is right below that, and he's drinking from the straw. That's little Warren. But what a great time we have with our grandchildren, and how much fun they are, and how much life and excitement they bring to our lives. I get a chance there. I'm wrestling with one of them in the lower picture. A couple of crazy guys up there above the wrestling picture. And then you see baptism. This is a blessing I've had as a pastor, to be able to baptize or take part in the baptism of each of my grandchildren. You see the baptism taking place there. My daughter-in-law's dad, John Denninger, and myself baptizing little Hudson, our most recent grandchild. And then his parents, Jessica and Daniel, blessing his son. And then below that, my wife, Kathy, giving a blessing to little Hudson as he's baptized. So what a great opportunity that we had to not only participate in, but to bless and to actually baptize these grandchildren. And then below it, Warren blowing out some candles, which was their Advent wreath, and seeing that passed on. When we were kids, we loved Advent wreath and that season, and we did that as a family. But then to see that passed on now to my grandchildren is a real joy. And William celebrating Thanksgiving and praising God for all of those types of gifts. So you have pictures like this of your own grandchildren, I'm sure, and you know what a wonderful legacy we have, and how we can share that and pass that on. In this slide, I want to make you aware, if you don't already know about it, of the Christian Grandparenting Network. This is it's a Facebook page, and you can just find it on Facebook, Christian Grandparenting Network. I encourage you to like it and to check it out. The Christian Grandparenting Network has any number of ministries connected with it, including the Grandparenting Network. You see that on the left or the right of the screen, Grand Camps and Grandparenting Toolkit. So you can find those on there. But I want to just play a very brief 2-minute segment by this guy, Pastor Josh Mulvihill, and I want to play this and have you listen to what I think is a really kind of profound message that he has to share. So let's see if we can.
I'm going to encourage you, parents and grandparents, to verbally share the gospel with your children and grandchildren. As I interviewed, again, families, I found that only somewhere between 25 and 50% that I interviewed across the country had ever verbally shared the gospel with their children or grandchildren. My jaw dropped when I got those results back. They had made the assumption that their children were part of a very good church or a very good Christian school, and it was happening in that setting, and therefore the gospel was being communicated there. And that's, praise the Lord, for good churches and good schools. But that does not take away our responsibility as well. And of course, we never tire of hearing of the gospel. And so this idea of teaching the law kind of has that implication to it. And then, of course, children need to know how to live according to God's law, which Jesus summarizes in the New Testament as love God and love others, as, of course, we see as very important here at Autumn Ridge Church. But throughout church history, the primary method to teach and disciple young people has been called family worship, where we open the Bible, we read it, we discuss it, we pray, we sing God's praises. And if you are not doing that in your home on a regular basis, I want to encourage you, maybe this is the next step that God has for you with your parent, in your parenting or grandparenting. You know, reading the Bible for 5 minutes at a time, a couple verses at a time, and discussing it doesn't feel very spectacular. And oftentimes we don't see immediate results. But if we read and discuss this Bible for 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week, which is my goal as a dad. My wife also does some reading with kids as well, so we kind of tag team up. But if we do that 3 times a week for an entire year, that equates to 26 hours with our children in God's Word. That's pretty significant.
So let's get back. I'll get the slide show up again. I thought he shared some pretty significant statistics there. 25 to maybe 50% of parents or grandparents verbally share the gospel with their children. When we think of grandparents and mission, you know, here's job number 1. And God puts us in a position, many of us, where we can do that in some creative and wonderful ways. Spending time with our grandchildren and sharing the gospel. So that's what I want to focus on with you today. And this is one great website and a great resource that's available to us to use. Another one is, and this is another one of their ministries, is called Grandparents at Prayer, the prayer ministry of the Christian Grandparenting Network. And they have some wonderful prayer helps for grandparents to use in praying for their children. And so that's another one you might want to check out on Facebook and take a look at those prayer prompts that they put up there. I usually take those prayer prompts that I find from this web or from this Facebook page, and I just share them on mine. And you'd be amazed at how many people click like and use those in their life. So it's not only me praying for my grandchildren, but then it's also the ripples go out to others as we share them on Facebook. So here are some questions that you might want to raise your hand or put some notes in the chat Q&A box rather. Why would a grandparent think, quotes, mission with their grandchildren? Why would we even think about that? Or how do grandparents see and understand their role spiritually? Do we have a role? How do we see that? Is that not more properly the role of parents? What's our role as grandparents? How can we influence the spiritual life and the spiritual maturation of our grandchildren? And what are some unique ways we might do that and be involved with or on mission with our grandchildren? I just like to throw that out for some discussion or conversation at this point, and then we're going to share some great tools for doing exactly that. Give that some thought, and we're going to move ahead then, and we're going to just take a look at and answer some of these questions. One of the things, maybe let me tell you a story. One of the things, and I mentioned that prayer network, and I was visiting a church one time down in Miami, one of our churches, and I'm waiting for the pastor to come. He had to be out for the moment, so I'm talking to the office manager there, or the secretary, and his name was Reuben, and I'm talking with Reuben. And I'm not sure how we got on the topic, but we were talking about praying for grandchildren. And Reuben tells me the story of a guy named Thomas Paulson. He had met this guy named Thomas. Thomas grew up in East Germany before the wall came down. That was 1990. And Thomas was a border guard in East Germany. And the role of the border guards wasn't always a real happy role. Their job was to keep people from coming in and maybe more importantly, keep people from going out of East Germany. Thomas tells how his grandmother prayed for him all the time. Thomas was not a believer. He was an atheist, or at least an agnostic. But his grandmother prayed for him all the time. Prayed. After the wall came down, the Berlin Wall came down, and he found himself I don't know if he got to West Germany or just this happened in East Germany, but Thomas said that he became a Christian through her witnessing and through her prayers. He believes that his grandmother prayed him to faith. Of course, through those prayers, God answered it and connected him in different ways with the gospel. But I just was really thankful to hear that story and wonder how many times that's repeated. One of the things that I do for my own grandchildren is I have a picture that we took last Christmas of all of our grandchildren. And for that picture, I think just about everybody was looking at the camera. Some were making kind of goofy faces, but we got Kathy and me and all of our grandchildren, all 7 of them. And I took that to Walgreens, or I sent it to Walgreens, and I had them make me a mug. And every morning I have my coffee in my grandpa mug, and I look at those kids on there, and I pray for each one of those children every single morning, using a prayer guide that I'll share with you as well. But so here is an opportunity. What are the prayer requests that we could bring to our children, bring to God on behalf of our children? How can we, our mission to our children, how can we lift them up and keep them in prayer? So I use a prayer mug. And then we also in our family use WhatsApp. And we're sharing all the time on WhatsApp what's going on in different families. Summertime starting, so now we saw kids in the pool yesterday, and kids playing in the yard and down a slide and climbing trees and whatnot. But we also use that for prayer requests for our families, so we can keep that up. So I think that's great. Video opportunities, video calls, but to use those opportunities for sharing the gospel and letting our children, our grandchildren know that we're praying for them. One of our preschool teachers here in Orlando, she is the administrator of a preschool, Tina is her name. She wrote me an email when I did this this similar video teaching with our district, and she said this. She said, I wanted to add a few things that I've been able to implement to engage my grandchildren. As a grandparent, I need to make sure my grandchildren, as well as the preschoolers I teach, know about the love of God and equip them to be disciples and disciple makers in the world. I have 4 grandchildren, ages 5 to 10, and up to this past summer, they lived within 10 minutes of me. Now, she goes on to say, a couple of them have moved to the coast, and I value our time together. Prior to them moving to the coast, all 4 of them attended the preschool where I teach. They were so used to seeing me every day, and once they graduated, not so much did they see her. And issues were arising during the morning and during school. So, she said, I started texting them in the morning before they get to school. I give them a brief message of encouragement to let them know I love them, that God loves them, and to have a great day. This has saved their parents' sanity on most days, and they look forward for the message from me each morning. Since they attend public school, it also puts God in their minds before they face others and who may not know God. So they all speak freely to others about God, and I still have that personal touch to let them know of God's love every day. And then she says this, which I think is really neat. She says, I should have thought of this a long time ago, but in the past few weeks, it has troubled me that I've not been able to do devotions with my granddaughter, age 10, who moved to the coast. Yes, we talk about God and how her day goes every day, but to truly sit and talk, not so much. Last week, after our service, our church service, and an important meeting, God placed it on my heart to extend my time with her even more and add a devotional time. So now in the evenings, we have a Bible devotional, usually her choice, and discuss how important this is to her life. We meet each evening just before she goes to bed on the phone, and she reads and I read, and we discuss. Last week, she even suggested that we write down what we're doing. So journaling from a 10-year-old. She gets excited when she talks about God and is now thinking how we can add more of her friends and cousins to our devotion time. God is so good. We just need to learn to listen and to have faith as a child. So that's from Tina Eaton here in Orlando. And I just thought, what a great way and a great opportunity to share and to witness and to be in mission to our children. So Ernie Freudenberg puts up there the last, they've been privileged to spend times in camping trips with grandchildren. And we do that too. We love to camp, and our grandchildren come and join us. And devotion time, campfire time, no matter where we are. That's what I used to love about little visits with God back in the day. You know, it was like, as we're going, we're making disciples, because little visits with God always had these, little stories of people throughout the day. So sharing, a God connection or a God story. So thanks for that, Ernie. I want to just move on and to the next slide and just focus here on another opportunity. Literal mission trips, literally. Grandparents actually taking their kids with them on a mission trip. And you can do that. I'm a member of some mission orgs, and they always offer mission trips. And we've had people grandparents take grandchildren. And really, it's a very special time and a great opportunity to do that. But here's another opportunity. If you can't actually go to Thailand, you might do a virtual mission trip. This is from Lutheran Hour Ministries. They call it Gospel Adventures, and it has its own website, or you can get to it through lhm.org too. But the gospeladventures.org, here's a Thailand trek, and you can download materials. There's videos. There are opportunities to do this together with your grandchildren. I think it was designed actually for Lutheran schools maybe originally, but why not during this time when we've all gotten used to Zoom and we want to connect with our grandchildren? Why not, if they're distant or if they're local, you can sit together at the table and do it. But why not do something like this, actually go on a virtual mission trip with your grandchildren? Or if you don't want to do a virtual one, consider a literal one. Here's another opportunity. These are two different orgs. Bob Scuderi, a lot of you know Bob, Mission Nation Publishing. And I put 3 books there at the top. The Bulletproof Missionary. I'm just finishing reading that. It is the story of Shang-Ik Moon, who was a professor at Concordia Irvine. What a fabulous story that is. It's just gripping. Another great one is The Despicable Missionary, the story of Julie Doss, as she grew up and she suffered the ridicule of other kids in school because she was a Christian, and she literally hated these other kids. And this is her story, working through the hate. And she and her husband Jay are up in Atlanta in our district. They're missionaries today, particularly with Pakistanis. And then there's No Accidental Missionary, the story of Tesfaye Tessema, who went through communism and went from an atheist and a God hater really to a missionary and a very good and special friend who is sharing the gospel message today. So these, and Mission Nation Publishing actually has some study guides for these, and they suggest they have school curriculum. They're doing a beta testing here in Florida and Georgia with some schools using these books as part of their curriculum to open the eyes of youth and children to mission opportunities, cross-cultural missions, some of the issues that these individuals faced as they came to America or as they dealt with people in their own cultures. So some great stuff available through Mission Nation Publishing. I just bought these 3 books to share with my oldest granddaughter, Clara, who is 12 and is a voracious reader. So we're going to give her these 3 books, and I know that God is going to use these books to have a spiritual impact in her life. As an example of that is below Bernice Bunkowski. You see Bernice there holding her little devotional book called Send Me. I met with Bernice just a couple weeks ago, Kathy and I did, and she gave me a bunch of her little devotional books called Send Me. And these are available, I guess they're available on Amazon, or you can go to her BEB Ministries, just Google that. But there's a picture of Bernice and Jean in Nigeria, and their 4 kids who they raised there. And so some of her experiences are in this book, in this devotional book. But she tells how she became a missionary and wanted to become a missionary at a young age because she read a story about a missionary, Mary Slessor, and that impacted her in such a powerful way that she prayed that she would be a missionary like Mary Slessor. And then she married Jean, of course, and they were sent over to Nigeria. So it was prayer answered. But last night, Kathy and I read a devotion in here called The Ministry of Prayer. And I'm not going to read it to you, but this particular devotion is exactly what I was talking about. And we're talking about prayer is an important means of mission. Every one of us can be a prayer missionary. So I just really appreciated what Bernice wrote and the devotion she has in there. Great things maybe to do with children or to share that with your children and grandchildren. So some great resources there. Here's another one. Some of you may be familiar with Visual Faith Ministries. Visual Faith, created by Connie Denninger and Pat Meier from the Michigan district. And Connie and Pat have put together a whole raft of resources, artwork, creative things that you can do with your grandchildren, and especially in these days where we're online and doing Zoom or other things, you could actually do some of these activities together with your grandchildren. Praying in color, coloring activities that work around, many of them work around the pericopes in the church year, but all kinds of prayer cards you can create. So if you aren't familiar with Visual Faith Ministry, and it's all free, everything is free there, so lots of resources to go and help yourself too. You have to create an account, but it is free. And so I just encourage you, if you're not making use of Visual Faith Ministry, to do that. And you'll be blessed by it. I know you will. So notice their mission: to serve and equip believers in the kingdom with visual faith tools that may bring the hope of Jesus to the world, and some great things to share with grandchildren too. Here's another site, and she's online, but also on Facebook. Deborah Haddix, I believe she's a life coach. She's a Christian, but she does this 30-day prayer challenge, praying with purpose. And she has designed that for grandparents who want to pray for their grandchildren. And one of the nice things that she's put together is a prayer guide, this 30-day prayer challenge. And I've taken that and printed it out. It's going to be in your resources. So be sure you, after we're done, you go and download the resources. But here is a 30-day scripture praying through different things for grandchildren. And what I've done is I've actually just put the day 1 through 30 on here. And every day then I just move on to the next one and pray that prayer with my prayer mug for my grandchildren. And it's just a reminder. Then also she has some other neat resources for grandparents to use with their grandchildren. So I encourage you to check out DeborahHaddix.com or her Facebook page, and you can get this ultimate list of parenting resources too, which is kind of a neat thing. Just one thing I wanted to mention, going back to the visual prayer or visual faith ministry. My daughter-in-law Jessica, who is Connie Denninger's daughter, when she was pregnant with her second son Charlie, made this beautiful prayer drawing, and it included prayers that she was praying for Charlie. And she's very artistic, so she put this art piece together, and then she shared it with us as grandparents, and she invited us to join her in praying for her little Charlie in utero. And what a privilege that was, to pray for our grandchildren even before they were born. And so that's another thing. If I can find that, maybe I could add that to the prayer resources, and you can see what that looked like. Here's another one called the Legacy Coalition. And this is also they're on Facebook, or they have a website. You could check it out. But the neat thing is it's designed for grandparents, recognizing that we have a role in spiritual development of our grandchildren. That's a great mission opportunity we have. And one of the things that they do is every Monday night, there are a few exceptions where they take off, but they have what they call Grand Monday Nights. And they use this to invite special speakers to speak and to share topics of importance as we think of ourselves as spiritual influencers in our grandchildren's lives. And so here, for example, the other night they did one this past Monday, June 14th, called Grandparenting Matters, encouraging and equipping grandparents in their biblical role. There was one that I thought was really good. I viewed this a while back, and it was called, it was by John Stonestreet, who works for the Colson Center, and it was called Equipping Grandparents to Understand, to understand the culture in which their grandchildren are growing up. So oftentimes we make assumptions based on our own frame of reference, our own friends, our own church experience, and our own cultural experiences. And our grandchildren are growing up in a very different world than we grew up in, of course. So this John Stonestreet, and you can look back on there. They have these all archived. You can look back, but it's kind of a neat one on understanding our grandchildren's world and helping them navigate it. So you see a couple of upcoming topics too. What do you do when your legacy isn't perfect? Like I always thought my grandparents were perfect, and I thought my parents were perfect. And I've come to know as a parent and a grandparent that isn't always the case. So that's one coming up. And then June 28th, the best bench warmers in the world. When mom and dad need a break, grandparents shine. So some neat stuff on legacy coalitions, and I recommend that to you also. If I registered once, and they continue then to send me emails every week letting me know what the topic is and giving me the link so I can just jump in if I want to watch Grand Monday Night. So really easy to use. Here's another one called grandkidsmatter.org. And this is, I'm not exactly sure that this is totally Christian, but I see the speaker there on this particular page, Dr. Ken Canfield. Some of you maybe have heard him. He has these little shorties that he gives on some Christian radio stations. I used to listen to him up KTIS up in the Twin Cities, up in Minnesota. But how do we, just helps for parents or grandparents. One of the things I notice on here is the reference to Grandparents' Day, and some of the other resources, the Visual Faith, or rather Deborah Haddock's, the Grandparents Network. They have some special resources that they'll bring out for Grandparents' Day, which is coming up in September. So you might want to prepare for that. One of the other topics that that he has on here on grandkidsmatter.org is estranged grandparents. And that is a topic that's a rather sad one, but it's a very real one. Whether you find yourself in that spot or not, there are many parents or grandparents who find that for one reason or another, their children keep their grandchildren from them and break those ties. I have several personal friends, two couples I'm thinking of right now. They don't know each other, they're not connected. But these are two couples that I've come across in my ministry and my relationships, dear friends, whose children don't let their parents have connections or very limited connections with their grandchildren. And so that makes some of these things that we've been talking about very hard and very challenging to do on two fronts. Number one, if I'm alienated from my grandchildren, I don't have access that I can share all these things. But number two, it really limits my mission work in their lives. But one of the things we can do always is that prayer ministry, that prayer mission. And my three favorite letters in the English alphabet, NGU, never give up, never give up. Just keep on praying, keep on loving, keep on looking for opportunities and be intentional and available and see what God does. There is a website called Alienated Grandparents, AGA, Alienated Grandparents Anonymous, and you can check that out if you've been cut off from access to your grandchildren. Or this might be a good ministry tool to share with other grandparents who are just really hurting because they don't have that active role in their grandchildren's lives. And there are some helps on there. Again, it's not totally Christian, but I think it can really be helpful as we look either to minister to ourselves or to minister to those who are hurting because of this. So that's another useful resource or website for you. Some other resources, if you know some other ones, I'd encourage you to share them or put them in the Q&A time right now, or raise your hand. Here are some other ones that I'll just talk about. I have a friend, Mike. It's Mike Zimmer, if some of you know Mike. But one of the things that Mike has done is he's purchased a new Bible every year or every other year, and he's written. So he'll buy a new Bible. I think he's used the Lutheran Study Bible, but I don't limit myself to that one. But purchase a new Bible, and as you go through and read it, he will write notes in there, and he'll write notes that are designed for this particular grandchild that he's thinking of and who's going to get this Bible as a gift. So he'll write some questions, some coaching questions. He'll write some faith observations. He'll write words of encouragement. And believe me, that is a treasured gift by his grandchildren. Even if you don't want to take the time to prepare a personalized Bible that way for your grandchildren, personalized notes of encouragement. I mean, literally taking a note card or a greeting card or something and writing stuff in there. I remember when I graduated from college, I guess it was, my grandpa was a Lutheran school teacher and principal, but he took the time to write. He had Parkinson's disease, and so he couldn't really write too well anymore. He signed his name, but he put that card in the typewriter and he typed some things in there, which I have always treasured. And so, never underestimate the cards, the personalized notes, even a personalized Bible as an opportunity to be in mission to your grandchildren. I mentioned the Denningers, John and his wife Connie, and one of the things they did during COVID was they had children's church for their grandchildren. So they have three beautiful daughters: Jessica, who's my daughter-in-law, Sarah, and Laura. And so Sarah, Laura, and Jess and their husbands and their grandchildren would all come together every Sunday and Papa and Gigi would have church for the kids. And they did that all during COVID. It was really a neat experience. And of course, the kids are active and they're up and around. And so they would use some of the resources, maybe visual faith or other things, and have the kids do activities, as well as sing together and pray together and have some time, age appropriate time in Jesus' word. So that was a neat thing. One of the friends I have in this district, Lois, she tells of doing something with her grandchildren every Saturday morning. It's called Grandma's Good News Time. And every Saturday morning, they get together on FaceTime or whatever tool they use, whatever app they use, and they have some time with Grandma. How's it going? Updates, highs and lows, but also some spiritual time and some prayer time, and sometimes activity time. So Grandma's Good News Time. I just thought that was a neat thing. So Ernie has some interesting things up there. I recorded my faith story in a number of segments and put them together as a 2-hour video. The faith story is the impact my grandchildren have had on me. I gave the video on a thumb drive to each grandchild. Wow, what a beautiful thing to do, and for them to have that real time video. My mom did some taping of stories when our children were little, and she read these stories to our children, and of course it was on cassette tapes. We still have those somewhere, but that was so neat that in those days my kids could hear Grandma whenever they wanted to. So thanks for that. And then there's Carol Wall, who says, we are great grandparents to 2 kids who live in our town. Their parents are not comfortable with their own faith. We do pray, say grace when the kids are here, but have a limit of what we can do with the family sharing faith. And this is, there's another dear friend of ours here in Orlando who has shared that very same thing. And, they're very cautious because they don't want these parents, taking their grandchildren out of the picture. But at the same time, they do pray and they recognize limits. But it's interesting because one of the things that they said was, sometimes, it's not about so much what you say, but it's how you treat other people. And it is the witness you give just by your life and your lifestyle that can make a difference or can open doors later on. So NGU, Carol, and anybody who's in that boat, NGU, never give up. Continue to pray for them, pray with them, always love them, always be available, and see what God might do in the midst of that. So I think, intentionality is important. Prayer is important. I think of the story of Thomas's grandma who prayed him to faith through the Berlin Wall. Can you imagine that? God answers prayer. And so I know that was when I was in parish ministry, that was one of the most difficult things that people came to me with, was their children and grandchildren who weren't following Jesus' footsteps, who weren't walking with Jesus. So we just continue to pray for them and love them. Another opportunity is special days and special holidays. There are these crazy national holidays or these crazy national days. There's a website called holidayinsights.com. holidayinsights.com. And there are more, there's one page called More Holidays. There's one page called Food Holidays. And I think if you look at that, every day of every month has a food holiday connected to it for some reason. Donut Day, Pickle Day, I don't know what, but I was going to look and I forgot to look before we started today. But there are these days, and you can use that as an opportunity to send a text to a grandchild and say, Happy Donut Day, thinking about you, love you, and then make a praying for you today or whatever, God bless you today. So you might use food, or there are some other crazy days that are on there, and you can always use those days to connect with your grandchildren in fun ways and unique ways, creative ways. and they'll appreciate that and they'll remember that. Another thing you can do is the Lutheran Church Extension Fund has, and this will be in the resources too, Young Investors Club. And Young Investors Club, for $25, you can make an investment in LCEF, and they can add to it as much as they want, but they can get free money from LCEF if they have good grades in school and submit their report cards or evidence of those good grades. And also, they can get $25 if they participate in community service. So you invite them to do a community service with you, or they do it with their parents or whatever, and then you submit that, and they can get $25 annually from LCEF deposited to their account. $25 also for good grades. So you can use LCEF and Young Investors Club to make a difference too. So then. I'll wrap this up and maybe throw it open if you have some more comments or questions. But 1 Peter 3, verse 15, always be ready to share the hope that you have as a Christian person, as a grandparent. Always be prepared to do that, but do it with gentleness and respect, especially as Carol reminded us, sometimes we don't have those opportunities that are available so readily, but we can do that with gentleness and respect, and always be ready. Look for the ways, be intentional, love them, and God will give us those opportunities, and those ripples will continue to ripple out. Children will remember their grandparents, will remember how their grandparents loved them and treated them. They'll remember some special things that their grandparents did throughout their life, and I want to be remembered by my grandchildren as somebody who loved Jesus and shared Jesus with them, and who lived the Jesus life. And somewhere along the way, we can have further conversations. But as they're young, we're just setting the stage and giving them some basic things, which later on can go into more depth or discussion as they wish and as the opportunity presents itself. Never miss an opportunity. Always be ready. So, yeah, thanks for the privilege of sharing today.